Hey, how you guys doing? Officer J back here with another video. Today we're going to have 3 questions that came from you guys. It's going to be questions in relation to law enforcement. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first question is, how do you handle situations where people might be nervous or afraid to approach law enforcement for help? Uh, Before we even answer that question, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to discuss the things that kind of lead up to that. Sometimes things that lead up to that, I should say. For instance, parents who use the threat of law enforcement or cops as a disciplinary tool. They'll say, uh, if you keep acting bad, I'm gonna call the cops, or if you keep acting bad, I'll have a cop arrest you. Or if you see, let's say, a cop in the grocery store, and the kid isn't even doing nothing, but you kind of use it as a preemptive threat, and be like, you see, I'll have that cop put you in the back of his cop car if you act bad. I always tell parents that's a no-no. Since we're talking about kids, and you have to use certain words. I'm like, that's a no-no, because you're using us as a disciplinary tool, and you're using us to instill fear in your kid, and it leads to kids not liking or not trusting police officers, and they're afraid to call us even when they need us. That can be an issue. I've actually had that issue. I actually have a little cousin that whenever cop cars would pass in front of her residence, she had no reason to be afraid of cops, but they use cops as a threat from whenever she was younger, that even when she was like 11, 12 years old, that when a cop car passed in front of her residence, she would just take off running into the house because she was so afraid. So that doesn't bode well. Now, once you get older, now will she still run for the hills when she sees a cop car? No. But will she see cops as somebody that she can call when she needs, or just have a positive outtake on cops? Probably not. So that's a bad thing. But as far as how do I approach it? So you can kind of feel when somebody's uneasy or nervous to speak to you. So normally what I do is I'll reassure them, like, hey, nothing's gonna happen. I'm here for you. I'll try the best that I can. Depending on what's going on, I'll say different things. Sometimes it doesn't work though. Sometimes the fear is just there. It's like trying to tell somebody don't be afraid of the dark whenever it's pitch black. It's like you can tell them, but until they make it up themselves that they, hey, look, this is no longer a thing, then you're just not going to change that. Uh, but like I said, for me, I just try my best to do what I can and try to serve the person as best as I can. All right. So next question: can you walk us through the process of what happens after someone calls 911 from dispatching officers to arriving on scene? So depending on the type of call. So if it's 911, it's probably more of an emergency. But if you call 911, what happens is they'll find out your location, because 911 is usually will bring you to a sheriff's office. They'll try to figure out exactly where you're at to find the right agency. Uh, Once they find the right agency, they'll either transfer, or they're dispatching for that particular agency. They'll just dispatch an officer. They'll try to get as much information as they can, but try to get an officer as quick to you as they can. They're probably not going to sit there and get all the information, but they're going to try to get the information that's going to help the officer approach the scene as safe as possible. So, name, what's going on, is there any weapons involved, is there any weapons in the house, uh, stuff like that. Because nobody wants to just say, hey, I need an officer to my house. Officer shows up, has no idea what's going on, and he's walking into a gunfight, or he's thinking he's walking into a gunfight, and it's just because somebody uh, lost their dog and they needed, or the dog was stolen, and now they need to file a police report. So that's usually what happens with those. 911 is very important. The dispatching is very important. I've actually said on many occasions that dispatching is probably just as important as the officers on scene, because they're the initial point of contact for most people. They're also you're an officer's lifeline. If you don't have a dispatcher that doesn't know what they're doing, or is incapable of getting them the help that they need, things can go a lot worse than they actually end up. But we're gonna get to the next question. I'm probably gonna make a whole video about the importance of dispatching. But the next question is gonna be, what's the biggest misconception people have about police work, and how does it affect your job? Well, the biggest misconception is that people just don't understand what we do. People think that it's a gray and white or black and white thing that we do every single day, but we live more in the gray. There's some calls where you can go to 2 calls in the same day back to back, that are very similar. You know, the call can come out the exact same, but you can have different outcomes depending on the call because different factors goes into it. That affects your job because you try to go into a certain call like, okay, well, I handled a call like this before, and you try to apply that same thing. Like, yes, you can apply certain elements, but if you think you're going to get the same result, then you're fooling yourself. You can deal with the same person multiple times and have a different result every single time. That's why we always say you don't want to get complacent in law enforcement, because once you get complacent, then you stop learning, you stop looking for certain things, and that's what's going to end up getting you hurt in the end. But and then another thing is too, whenever I say people don't understand what we do is, people think that an officer's job is just to make arrests. Like, no, believe it or not, we do more social work than actually arresting people. At least at the department that I've worked at 3 departments so far in my 10-year career. We get more calls of where we end up having to go in people's homes and having to play counselors, marriage counselors, family counselors, pastors in some incidents, or sometimes little like first responders, medical, not even medical professionals, but keeping people alive or diagnosing to see like, hey, is this person okay? Do they need an ambulance? Do they just need like first responders? Do we need to toss them in the back of a unit right now and get them to a local hospital because we don't have the time to wait for an ambulance to get here? So that's the biggest misconception, that people think that we're just going to come in there and do a certain thing when there's just so many wide variety of things that we have to go through before we even make a decision of that nature. And like I said, it does affect our job because, you know, the public thinks we do one thing when we actually do a multitude of things. And whenever they expect you to come in here and do just this one thing and you don't do it, they think that you're not doing your job, you know, and it can lead to bad relations with the public. But most of them don't understand, like, hey, jail wasn't the right option. There's a lot of times where I tell people, like, oh, hey, I want this guy arrested. I'm like, jail isn't where this guy needs to be. Like, this guy probably needs to be in a hospital because he has some type of mental issue, which means he's not in control of his actions. So me putting him in jail is not going to get him the help that he needs. But that's it for this video. You guys keep sending your messages, sending your questions. You can just send them on Facebook. You can send them on the community tab on here. You also can go to my Discord. All that's linked in. Other than that, you guys have a good one. And don't forget to like and subscribe.